Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Thinking Football Summit 2024 special webinar with the title Football and Education, Crafting a Path to Excellence on and off the Field. My name is Pedro Pinto. I'm founder and CEO of Empower Sports, a sports communications agency. I have a long career in communications. I've been working with athletes for a long time as well. So I'm really thrilled to be taking part in this discussion, which is going to focus very much on the opportunities and challenges that are there for athletes to find a second career after their time on the pitch ends. As we know, for many international players and national amateur players, a career can last 15 to 20 years if you're lucky. And it's incredibly important to prepare a second path to another career, to have an opportunity to excel at other activities as well. So we're going to be speaking with 4 experts in this field that can give us concrete examples of programs that they're working on and how they're assisting these athletes in trying to find other ways to be successful and responsible in their careers, utilizing all the knowledge, all the insight, all the expertise that they have from a performance standpoint and finding a transition from the pitch to the office. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce our 4 guests who are here. I'll start with Joël Pinson, who is from UEFA. He's responsible for overseeing the executive education programs, especially the Executive Master in Global Sport Governance and also the Executive Master for International Players. He's actually here in Portugal on an MIP course at the moment. So Joël, great to see you. Welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Also with us is Gareth Farrelly, who is a former Premier League and international footballer. He found a second career in the law landscape. He qualified as a lawyer. He's held a variety of relevant and influential positions, among which he was the Court of Arbitration for Sport arbitrator and Premier League judicial panel member. In addition, he's also a member of Sports Resolutions Independent Panel of Arbitrators and Mediators. He is a member of the Football Association's judicial panel and sits on both the chairman's panel and the football panel. Long story short, Gareth, you've done all right since you stopped playing. So welcome to this panel and to this discussion as well.
Thanks, Pedro. Look forward to
it. Next, we have Lukas Dorda, who is a business and sports professional with over a decade's experience in sports business, mainly in marketing, sponsorship, and fan engagement. He's currently working as the director of online programs at the Johan Cruyff Institute in Barcelona, and he'll explain a little bit more about the courses and opportunities that this institution also offers. We'll get into that in a moment. So welcome, Lukas, as well.
Thank you, Pedro, and hello, everyone.
Last but not least, we've got Gareth Jennings, who is joining us from the Middle East. He's currently the technical director of the UAE Pro League. He's also a senior academic advisor at Focus Sports Education, which we'll get into very shortly. His resume also includes time spent as in the advisory board of the Football Association of Wales and FIFA as well. Now, gentlemen, I could go into more details regarding your respective roles and responsibilities, but I'd rather you do that because this is far from a monologue. I want this to be an entertaining discussion and with participation from everyone. So I think an opening question to kind of get the ball rolling here would be for each of you, and each of you will be the 3, Joël, Lukas, and Gareth from Focus, to talk about the opportunities that your respective organizations are offering athletes in the academic sphere. So maybe we can start with Lukas from the Johan Cruyff Institute.
Okay, thank you. It's always good to go first. Basically, if we are looking at our portfolio, what we try to do, it's basically follow our mission and also the legacy of a great man, Johan himself, because he always wanted to deliver and to create something for an athlete and especially football players to have, on one hand, dual careers, but also on the other hand, to have the possibility to basically thinking about the day after. So in our case, what we try to do at the moment, we have different online, blended, and on-campus programs that are focusing on football business purely. So it goes from very fundamental programs, basic programs for anyone that basically haven't studied ever in his or her life, through some postgraduates, through some online masters applied in football business, and also we have a specific on-campus program in football business in partnership with FC Barcelona.
Okay, great, and we'll get into those in just a moment. Joël, tell us about what UEFA is doing in its academy, which is the area of the organization dedicated to education, with a specific focus maybe on the MIP.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, basically now for many years, UEFA developed some academic programs, both by itself, but also in relation with universities across Europe, to train the administrators, the managers of our main stakeholders. I mean, primarily the National Association, but also clubs, representative, leagues representative, and so on. And back in 2015, we started with the UEFA Executive Master for International Players, with this idea that we need also to offer a pass for former players to remain in the game, not only on technical side, because we know that, I mean, not all players want to be a coach or really on the side of the pitch, but also offer the opportunity to develop skills to be in a decision-making position in the future. So that was done back in 2015. Fast forward, and now basically we are running the 5th edition already of this Executive Master. And in the meantime, with the number of requests we receive every season from players, both active and retired, who wants to basically start an education, we also started to launch other programs, some also fully online, because it's true that especially for players in career, you need to have this flexibility to do it from wherever you are and at different time, also according to the schedule of the trainings and so on. And some in blended learning, also realizing that you still need some networking opportunities. So I think from one initial program that was the MIP, now we have around, let's say, 6 programs that are either only designed for players or designed in a way that we can also integrate both active and former players in the trainings.
Thanks, Joël. Gareth Jennings, tell us about Focus and what it also aims to accomplish in this landscape, please.
Thank you, Pedro. Yeah, so I think at Focus, we really recognise that there's a demand from players in the game now in terms of pathways into other areas within the game or pathways outside of the game. And we offer 2 really sort of core programs. One is the Mini MBA in football, which is a real core focus around leadership, and then also the Focus MBA in football management. Now, we've tried to make the program as flexible as possible. So there's blended learning programs, so you're able to complete the program online, but we do also offer on-site opportunities as well. So recently, our most recent cohort have just spent some time in London with the Premier League, and we also had Dougie Friedman from Crystal Palace come and speak to the group, and also Les Reed, former England technical director. So what we're trying to do is actually recognise not just the why, but the how, in terms of taking some of those skills and knowledge that you absorb from the learning. How do you go and then implement them in the game to become really efficient in your role? So when we bring in cohorts, when we look at the cohort and what's the mix and the blend of the people within that group, because essentially they're not just learning from the tutor, they're actually learning from each other as well, and actually want to really broaden their networks. But the experts that come in and deliver, what we want them to do is not just be experts in pedagogy, so being able to transfer that knowledge, but can really show what happens in the real world. So yes, we'll give them some academic knowledge and some underpinning knowledge around the academic aspects of the program, but it's very much around what we do in the reality of the game. So very much a focus on that how. Like I said, we have a number of different programs, but we really focus on that flexible pathways to make sure there's access for all.
Fortunately, there is an increase in the number of courses and programs that are available specifically to athletes to help with a possible transition into other areas of the football industry. Liga Portugal itself also has the business school, which has been operating here in Portugal to aid professionals in that realm. But Gareth, calling upon your experience as an elite footballer, how aware do you think the generality of professionals playing today is of the need to get educated and the need to give themselves options for when they hang up their boots? Would you say there's a general awareness that this needs to happen, or there's still a big majority of professionals who are either in denial or just not aware that perhaps they should be looking at these options?
I think it's probably a combination of the two, Pedro. I think it's a really, really good question. I think every person's case is different. It's really interesting, even listening to the guys give the introduction, because whilst I've had the benefit of being in the UEFA Academy myself and taking part in the MIP program, it's always brilliant to hear about other courses, other programs. I think there's lots of different elements to this, sat here as an ex-player, because the psychology is slightly different. You know, you understand this, Pedro. We've spoken about it for years, as does everybody. But the point being is that some of the skills that help you be incredibly successful in football can also be destructive when their football career is finished, because in most cases, you don't really want to think about the inevitable, which is that retirement comes. And that is indiscriminate, because irrespective of the amount of money you have in the bank, you still face a situation from a purpose point of view where on a Sunday, we're coming to the end of another season. I'm sure there'll be a certain group of players facing that, whereas on the Sunday, you're being clapped off to adulation. And the reality on the Monday is you're not going to be a footballer anymore. So that can be incredibly daunting for everybody. I think what's changed, and again, even just listening to the introductions, is the fact that there are more, opportunities out there. And that can be, we're talking about education. My own particular case is that when you've been an elite athlete for a certain period of years, like you said, it can be, careers can span any number of years. Sometimes there will be an event or something happen that provokes you to have to start to think about these things. But I would never sit with somebody now and say you have to have all of these things figured out now. I think the good thing is that an awareness is kind of step one. And then you have the opportunity to kind of try, dip your toe in the water with regards to different areas. So there's a natural filter towards coach, manager, sporting director, technical director, all of these areas, like Joel said, that now have, qualification opportunities or education opportunities of their own to enhance and develop a CV outside of just your footballing career. So I think events like this, and the more awareness there is, and the better publicized courses, education opportunity is, the better it will be for players. But you don't have to have it all figured out straight away.
Normally, when players retire, there are certain paths traditionally that they have explored, whether that's coaching, whether that's punditry, so commentating on TV or on the radio, whether that's being brand ambassadors for clubs. We've seen that happen a lot, but there are really a lot of other options out there. You just need to be qualified, right? So tell us how that process of qualification works and how you find athletes being able to adapt to a very different environment, because I've had the pleasure of being part of a few MIP courses where that first challenge is actually getting used to a completely new culture, corporate culture. So how do you help athletes make this transition? And it's free. I don't know who wants to go first here.
Well, I can jump if you want. No, I think your comment is exactly right. I mean, one of the major issues very often we see with the participants in our program is that indeed they have an amazing network. The name can help them to open some doors. But that's work at first, and then they enter. Typically, if you go to like football administration, you are in competition with a lot of people who actually have a different profile, but they all have kind of a similar profile. Meaning that the same for me. We did like classic educations, then you gain professional experience, and in a way, you expect the people you will hire to have more or less the same profile. And also it's people with this experience of basically working in office, long hours, being used to sit, and having also this political dimension that you have in football a lot. That is kind of new for a lot of the former players when they enter. So definitely, I think there's a bit the two elements of, first of all, making them also understand that the skills they develop, and I think Gareth mentioned it really well, the skills they develop during the career will be very useful in the second career, but they still need to be able to understand how you can kind of use them and transition them. And the other one is also just to gain experience. You're not going to be the president, the CEO, or the best sporting director directly after. You might want to gain some experience. It's also why typically in some of our programs, those who are not working already, we really we really push them. Actually, it's even mandatory in the program, but to gain some professional experience through some internship that we can also help them, maybe also multiply the experience, to make sure they get used to this corporate environment, and maybe realize that at first they thought that it's what they wanted, but actually in the long run, they realize that they miss maybe sometimes a bit the excitement that goes with
the adrenaline, right?
Adrenaline they had during the career. So I think by gaining experience, it's also a good way to realize what you like and maybe what you don't like, and helping you also to guide you in the direction. Because as you mentioned before, Pedro, it's very often the idea is that as a former player, you can be a coach, you can be a TV pundit, you can be basically a brand ambassador. But actually, if you look at the different jobs you have in football, there are many opportunities. So it's also about gaining, knowledge about all opportunities you have.
Gareth Jennings and Lukas, I wanted you to also explain a little bit how you've seen the transition and how you help athletes with this when they start doing your courses.
Yeah, thanks, Pedro. I think first of all, I think we're probably looking at a different breed of player coming through now as well. So if you look at the level of investment in player development, there's almost that need to be a really effective learner. So I think academy systems now, as they develop players when they come into the modern game, are really conscious around not academically how strong that person is, but then being a really effective leader. So we think about how we recognize potential in talent. So things like players self-correcting when they're on the pitch. So we're recognizing the players in terms of how they learn and how we can best support that learning mechanism. And a lot of the modern day players as well are also demanding that that's part of their journey. So they're not just on a football journey. There's actually a bigger contribution holistically to their own development, and the education piece plays a major part in that throughout their career. But for me, it's very much around, how do we utilize and engage those individuals in activities that are probably out of the norm for them? So giving them a broader network of people. So it's not the network that they have existed within. Actually, it's broader than that. So obviously Gareth's spoken about his pathway in terms of the legal side. So can we connect people to different types of people within the game and different industries that are available to them? So I think a big thought needs to go into cohort assembly. So when someone steps into a course program, okay, who are we exposing to them? What experiences are they going to gain other than that knowledge of the course program? And then just having some flexibility and understanding around those people. The demands of being an elite athlete are huge, and they're normally being balanced out with not just being an elite athlete, actually having a family life, but then also having to prepare for a career outside or after the game. So having that flexibility with the course programs and the understanding that some people may not be on live seminars, they may want to access recorded seminars, but also having that flexibility to access people or the tutors to be able to support with some of that knowledge as well. So I think the flexibility is really, really important. And I say that I think the cohort piece is really, really important for us. One, just to give them that sort of diversity of knowledge that will be available to them, and the diversity of network as well.
Lukas?
I think both Joel and Gareth already mentioned several very important points, be the flexibility, be obviously the overall point in the transition. For us, it's very important to think that many of the football players, they are coming to us when they are still playing. So during the playing days, not once they've already finished or they hang the boots. So for us, this is the key thing, and it's very much related with the flexibility and also with the fact that often they are still playing. They are still distributing their time between the playing days, and obviously, it's like often the unfortunately the overall status quo is like football players are having a lot of time, free time. It's not like that, and when they are transitioning towards the end, some of them already accepting it, they are embracing it, and in the last years of their careers, they have a lot of different business ventures. So when they are coming to us, they are coming with different points of view on one hand, but also with different needs, I would say, or different challenges. So, for example, I will never forget when we were having several players coming to us after the postgraduate or master. They were saying like, you know what, I'm still playing, but I finally have the feeling that I understand what's going on when I'm on the meetings with my agent, negotiating a deal with my sponsor. When I'm finally understanding why the coach is actually sending me for a promo actions, because as a player, usually you don't like those. You try to skip those. You're like, oh, another advertisement. Why do we have to do this? It's like I want to focus on those things that I have to do, which is being better and basically perform on the pitch. So having this kind of opportunities to study, to see the other side of the industry, of the business, it's helping the players a lot. And then obviously, like Joel said, then they start to decide, do I want to still be closer because the adrenaline is missing? I want to stay closer to the pitch. I want to be a coach. I want to be a football director. So they go one way. But then you have many that are feeling like, okay, I want to do more, especially players that are coming from, I don't want to obviously say more or less developed football countries, but some members of, let's say, golden generation of Costa Rican football studied with us, and they are just thinking like, I want to give something back. I want to make the world football in my country better, so the next generations will be having, let's say, easier pathway towards becoming professional and helping out. So obviously the motivations are very, very different, but the most important thing is to guide them towards the overall process of transitioning to basically finish your playing days, and help them and guide them to make sure that they will be 100% sure that if I'm going this path, it's going to be something that I'm going to enjoy, because obviously I'm going to have many, many years ahead that I will be working with.
One note I wanted to add just before I move on to the next question: if anybody watching wants to participate and send a question to our panel, you can do so as well. And then if we have time at the end, I'll choose some and share it with the group. Gareth, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen some of your professional players make when it comes to career management, and how did the MIP course specifically help you?
Oh God, Pedro. Some people say mistakes are learning, right? But I think you have to make mistakes along the way. And again, you can talk about the courses, you can talk about cohorts. We use words like transition. You talk about profile whilst you're playing. I think you have to be quite open, and there's a challenge sometimes for ex-footballers or ex-footballers, because when you finish playing, I think where we were very lucky as an MIP cohort was, I think there was an incredible kind of honesty in the group, because you had a large group of people that were coming to a really, really new stage in their lives, and it can be difficult. So like you say mistakes. Whilst I was playing, I would say I was a walking mistake, right? And I joke with you, my path to becoming a lawyer was to deal with a lot of the issues I faced whilst I was playing. Yeah. So listening to the guys today, like Joel is different, obviously, because we have a relationship from the UEFA Academy, but to listen to, Gareth and Lukas speak about the education thing, is they were things that may not have been there for us to that same level. So there wasn't that level of visibility. So that's a really, really positive thing. That kind of mistakes, pitfalls, dangers kind of goes back to where I started, which is, for some of the people maybe looking or listening today, is that one, you don't have to have the answers, but when you stop playing, it's really important to have good people around you. So that might not be a direct link into everybody else on the panel today, but it might be somebody who knows the guys, trusts the guys, and then develop their own relationships. So you exist in a world of football that is incredibly challenging, but the point is you're familiar with it, you're comfortable with it. We can have a joke again that like there's people who've played in front of 75,000, 80,000 people week in, week out. You ask them to do a PowerPoint presentation and they're going to run for the corner. And I would have been no different, but in studying and returning to studying and starting to, people talk about another term, lifelong learning and education, and what it brings you is that you don't lose those competitive, elements. You don't lose that drive, but it's very, very purpose driven. So mistakes, you continue to make them when you retire. But the point is that once they lead you onto something or potentially open up a different avenue, a door, a network, there's still opportunity there. And just as a last point, like Pedro, your reputation as a player, football is incredibly hierarchical. You know what I mean? You deal with people every day. You can have won, World Cups, European Cups, but then different people in different countries have different careers. But the point is how you can use that. Your reputation and your career gets you in the door, a bit like Joel said, but then you have to have the skills to be able to stay there. So I think there's also, when we talk about honesty, it's equally applicable to the education, is that education is the start of the journey, but then there's a continuous progression around that, because sometimes because you've been at the top, you think I've done a course or I'm ready to go in at that elite level again. And it doesn't really work like that. So the corporate world is different. You have to earn your stripes. You have to build up your experience. So there will always be those unicorns that finish football on Sunday and go into a CEO role on Monday. But then the next question for them is, have I got the necessary skill set to be able to stay here? So Pedro, everybody on the call, like we're never not challenged. You're never not challenged professionally whilst you're playing football, but then those challenges are the same, but slightly different in a different world that you don't necessarily have experience or exposure to. And that comes back to the better prepared you are, the better educated, the better informed you are, the more equipped you'll be to deal with that.
I have a couple of great questions from the audience, so to speak, and I'll get to them in just a moment. I just had a quick one, and maybe for Joël, because I think it's so important to have a good relationship with stakeholders across the football landscape in order to reach the right people with the right opportunities, right? Because you need to rely on national associations and clubs and player organizations to make sure that you get the right message to them and say, hey, we've got this opportunity. This is something you should really consider. So how does that work, that outbound and inbound business, and the influence of the stakeholders in that?
Yeah, I think, as you mentioned, it's key. I mean, you see today we are at the league here in Portugal. I think for us, it's also, the realization is that both you have a lot of different jobs in the football industry, but you also have a lot of different type of organization that might offer you opportunities. And very often, and that's true for football players, but it's also true actually for a lot of people who are studying sports management and so on. Sometimes you don't really realize the diversity of organization that you have. So I think, as it was mentioned before, you need to create this relation with the different stakeholders. You need to make sure they are involved and they can also have a voice in the education journey of the people, but then the people who are doing it have the opportunity to meet them and create this specific link, because they might bring different perspectives, but they might also bring different opportunities for the participants. So I think typically, and I guess it's true for everyone here, but in any education programs you do, I represent UEFA, but as an educator and in an education programs, we try to make sure that as many voices can be heard and as many people as possible can enter and, offer different perspective in the same issues, because it's also how you will develop personally and you will develop kind of a critical mind. And maybe just to kind of react on one of the points Gareth mentioned before, I think it's true that, a mistake will be made, but the first important step is actually to jump in an education program. And we see it a lot with the former players, especially. you finish your career, you are at the top of what you can perform, and then you kind of have the mindset to go out of your comfort zone and start a new education journey. And I think that's the first very important step for a successful transition, is kind of recognizing that you might not know everything, that to succeed you need to go out of your comfort zone. And in a way, when you select this kind of people and you have this kind of people approaching you, you know already that the transition will be successful to a certain extent, because they're there to try to a certain extent.
Okay, thanks for that. We're going to end with 3 questions from people watching. So the first one I find particularly interesting is, I am a FIFA licensed football agent from Africa. Are there some great organizations that offer life coaching or classes to young African players? I would like to give them some ideas. I don't know who wants to jump on this one.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to come in. I wouldn't say it's specific to cohorts or individuals from Africa, but what I think is really important now is accessing academic routes that offer really good support mechanisms for the individual. I think particularly if you've come from the game, what tends to happen in the professional game, the support mechanisms around the individual are very, very good. What that then does is probably not give you some of the skill sets that you require when you move on to your next career, in terms of, right, well, how do I help myself? So I think all of the academic institutes that are here today and speaking, we'd really encourage people to actually call us and speak to us about what your academic pathway looks like. And we understand that every individual is different, and that pathway will look different to you. And it's how we can support that. So whether you're an agent from Africa or a player that's been in the game, what we want to do is speak to you about your individual pathway and what that could look like, what the support mechanisms would look like around that. Because sometimes it will be one of the experts within the organization that would be able to support you. It may be at Focus Sports Education, for example, we always have a review session post workshop, and our founder will do that. So Ahmet will actually sit, and we want criticism, we want some challenge, but we want the cohort to also speak to each other and challenge each other. So actually those coaching and mentoring opportunities actually evolve within the cohort. So we want people to call us and speak to us about the program and what it looks like for them, and how we can support and develop their individual needs to be able to progress and fulfill their potential.
Thanks, Gareth. Next question. There are not only manager business roles, but roles like analysts, scouts, etc. in a club or federation, of course. How do you try to prepare professionals to take one of these roles, and how much potential do you see in this?
Yeah, I can jump. We started, actually, as I mentioned before, back in 2015, we started only with the MIP, which is really based on management and basically preparing people to be more in a decision-making position. But indeed, you have a lot of different roles. So over the years now, we develop a lot of different trainings, also for scouts, for agents, and so on, that are not only dedicated to former players, but also for people who are already working in the industry. And I think when you look now at the level of professionalization, most of the clubs especially, but the federation also are going through, definitely the potential is huge. And I think before, when we were speaking about the multiplication of job opportunities and different jobs you have in the organization, that's definitely one of the big center of interest. So especially as a former players, coming with the technical knowledge you have of the game, you start with a huge advantage, of course. But then once again, I think, it's something about knowing it from the pitch. It's also something else, knowing the different tools you have at your disposal, the way to report about it. So I think it's where, there's learning by doing, but there's also some knowledge you can gain from these different trainings, but definitely huge potential there.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
If I may add to this something, if you don't mind.
Please.
I think it's also very important to understand that obviously there are so many different roles, and I fully agree with Joe what he said. Obviously, from our scope, our main scope is the business education. However, what is very interesting to see is people who are coming with a certain amount or certain level of I don't know, being scouts, being analysts, but they want to grow within the organization. So it's not just be one of the scouts, one of the analysts. They just want to be the head of the departments. So for them, it's still very interesting to come to get some business education as well, learn how to lead people, learn how to be a better leader, learn how to create a high-performing team. And that's something it's also very important. So I think and I fully agree with Joel, the professionalization of sport is and football is getting much better. And it's also very important to not just be a close-minded in a way that, oh, I'm just a scout, I'm just an analyst. You should be always thinking about the big picture and try to grow. And as you're growing, there are obviously different opportunities how you could improve yourself as a professional.
Thanks for adding that, Lukas. Final question. Most former players won't earn anywhere near the salaries they were getting as a footballer. Do clubs provide players with sufficient financial education, encouraging them to invest their earnings so they can live a comfortable lifestyle after retirement?
I can start with this one, Pedro, if that's okay, considering majority of my day job is dealing with, let me say, bad practice and bad actors in the football industry. So I deal with a lot of bad agents, a lot of bad financial advisors. I think this is a fascinating topic on its own, possibly for another webinar, standalone webinar. But in bringing it back to the title, I think all of these things are still relevant. So clubs, do they do enough to prepare people financially? Again, it goes back to the psychology I mentioned earlier about when you're playing, for the most part, you're rightly focused on fulfilling your potential and maximizing your career. What people tend to do, and again, given the profile of professional athletes, there aren't many, but there are some who come from, a sophisticated background or are better educated within the game. So it's the gift and the curse. It can be a big problem, because even though you recognize that you need professional assistance and regulated individuals, your skill set and your knowledge is such that you don't necessarily have the awareness as to what best practice is. And I think that's a challenge. And I think for clubs, again, a bit like the webinar today, there's an increased awareness around this. And I think clubs are more aware of it. But clubs, it's difficult for, because they're equally cautious with regards to the people they're willing to introduce their players to. So I think it's anything but straightforward. But the psychology, again, Pedro, is that you can retire with a huge amount of money in the bank, but you're still going to face a lot of the same issues that people with less money face. Money gives you freedom and gives you time, and there's not those immediate pressures. And that's why there's no one size fits all. You can play at a top level for a long period of time, but there's players who play not necessarily at the top level who won't make enough money from their football career. And again, a bit like what everybody said today, they in some ways will be the people that will possibly think about education earlier, because they are recognizing at an earlier point that they're going to need to have a second career, or they're going to need to work when their football career is over. So there's no size fits all. The positive thing is like today, it's having access to people who have that knowledge and experience, but also not being afraid to ask for help. So, we talk about all of these things. It can be quite a challenge. There's no bad conversations. One of the things, again, is separate webinar, Pedro, networking. You talk about your profile, trying to develop that outside of the game. There's a whole host of different things. So I think there's a lot of people doing a lot of good things, a bit like the webinar today. The more visibility there is, the more awareness there is, be it through the associations, the player unions. That can only be a good thing for players to understand that first career, whilst incredible, and you might not be able to replicate the highs and the memories that go with it, there's a long life in front of you that can be equally as fulfilling.
Well, Gareth, Lukas, and Joël, I wanted to thank you for sharing your insights, your expertise on this subject that is so important for the football industry. I think it's fair to say that it's quite a good appetizer ahead of the event that takes place here in Portugal, the Thinking Football Summit from the 12th to the 14th of September. Definitely a lot of ideas here that could be developed, as Gareth Farrelly alluded to in other webinars on its own. And for sure, these will be some of the topics that will be discussed in Portugal in the physical event later this year. Continued success with your respective organizations and courses as well. Thank you for the great opportunities that you are giving to a lot of professionals within the football landscape to continue to develop their skills across different areas that they have up to the moment where they decide to make that transition. From my side, it was a pleasure to take part in this Liga Portugal webinar conversation. For everybody watching, thank you so much for tuning in. For those who also sent questions and participated, there is a little bit of a surprise coming your way via email following this webinar, so stay alert for that as well. Wishing everybody a great rest of afternoon and a great week as well. Signing off. Take care.